You're 24 years old, splitting a two-bedroom apartment in Denver with your college roommate, and you just got your first real job making $51,000 a year. After 4 years of late library nights, dining hall pasta, and a diploma that cost you $31,000 in student loans, you finally feel like you've crossed some invisible finish line. The direct deposit hits on a Friday. You check your bank app 7 times between noon and 5 p.m. When the number finally appears, something in your chest loosens. You made it. You're earning real money. You tell yourself you'll start saving next month. After you get settled. After you buy a real bed frame. After the first student loan payment clears and you see what's actually left. Next month turns into next quarter. Next quarter turns into next year. You blink and you're 30, and next month still hasn't arrived. Or maybe you're 37. You bought a house 3 years ago that you could technically afford on paper, but the mortgage payment, the property taxes, the homeowner's insurance, the HOA fee, the water heater that died in February, and the daycare bill for your 2-year-old have turned your checking account into a revolving door. Money enters, money exits, nothing accumulates. Your parents keep telling you that owning a home is building equity. They fail to mention that building equity means nothing if your retirement account has been frozen at $19,000 for 3 consecutive years because every spare cent goes toward the house. Or you're 45, earning the most you've ever earned. On paper, this should be the decade where everything comes together. Instead, you've got aging parents who need increasing amounts of help, a 15-year-old staring down college in 3 years, and a 401k balance that looks like it belongs to someone a decade younger. You lie awake some nights doing math you don't finish because the answer scares you. Or you're 56. Retirement isn't some hazy concept that exists in a distant theoretical future anymore. It's 9 years away. Maybe 11 if you're lucky and your body cooperates. You opened your retirement account statement last Tuesday for the first time in 8 months, and the number sitting there made your stomach drop. It's not enough. You know it's not enough. You don't know exactly how much enough is, but you know this isn't it. Or you're 62. You just got a letter from the Social Security Administration telling you what your monthly benefit would be if you claimed right now. The number is smaller than you expected. You're wondering whether you should take it immediately or wait, but you don't know how to think about the decision because nobody ever taught you the math behind it. Your brother-in-law says take it now because you never know what could happen. Your coworker says wait until 70. They can't both be right. The difference between those two choices is potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars over your lifetime, and you're about to make the decision based on a conversation at a barbecue. Here's the thing nobody ever sits you down and explains. Every single decade of your financial life has a specific trap built into it, a predictable, well-documented, statistically verifiable pattern that catches millions of Americans at roughly the same age, in roughly the same way, for roughly the same reasons. These traps don't discriminate based on intelligence or work ethic or good intentions. They are structural. They're woven into the economics of American life at each stage, into the incentive structures of the industries that serve you, into the cultural scripts you absorb from your family and your friends, and the algorithms feeding you content every day. The student loan industry is designed to get you borrowing before you understand compounding. The mortgage industry is designed to get you buying at the maximum the bank will approve. The retirement industry is designed to collect fees while you're confused. The Social Security system is designed with rules that reward patience, but nobody explains the rules until it's too late to benefit from them. These traps will consume your wealth silently, decade by decade, unless you see them coming and build a specific escape plan for each one. That's what this video is. A decade-by-decade breakdown from your 20s through your 60s. What the trap is, how much it costs, why it works, and exactly how to get out. Whether you're 22 or 62, you're sitting inside one of these traps right now. By the end of this, you'll know which one. You'll know the way out. You'll know what's coming in the next decade so you can prepare before it arrives. Let's get into it. Your 20s. The trap is delay disguised as logic. The most expensive sentence in your 20s is, "I'll start when I make more money." It sounds reasonable. It feels mature even. You're looking at your paycheck, subtracting rent and student loans and car insurance and groceries and your phone bill, and the number left over feels too small to matter. $37, $82, $115 if you skip going out on Saturday. You look at that number and you think, what difference could this possibly make? I'll wait until I'm earning 70 or 80,000, and then I'll invest properly. This logic has a name. Financial professionals call it the income threshold fallacy, and it is the single most destructive belief in your 20s. Here's why. If you invest $200 a month starting at age 22, earning an average of 8% annually, by age 65, you'll have approximately $879,000. Let that number land. $879,000 from $200 a month. That's less than the cost of a daily DoorDash habit. Now here's the number that should make you physically uncomfortable. If you wait until 32 to start the exact same $200 a month at the exact same 8% return, you'll arrive at 65 with approximately $375,000. The 10-year delay cost you $504,000. You didn't invest less. You didn't earn a lower return. You just started a decade late, and $500,000 evaporated from your future. This is the mathematical reality of compound interest, and it is so powerful that Albert Einstein allegedly called it the eighth wonder of the world. Whether he actually said that is debatable. Whether the math is real is not. Compound interest rewards time above all else. The earlier you start, the more time the money has to multiply. And your 20s are the only decade when you possess the maximum quantity of the one resource that makes compounding work: time. Irreplaceable, non-renewable, constantly depleting time. Let me introduce you to someone I'll call Terrence. Terrence graduated from the University of Georgia in 2020 with a degree in marketing and $34,000 in student loans. His first job paid $46,000. He lived in Atlanta, where rent for a one-bedroom in a decent neighborhood ran $1,300. His student loan payment was $350 a month. His car note was $287. After taxes, insurance, groceries, gas, his phone, and basic living expenses, Terrence had roughly $220 a month of actual discretionary income. He had a choice. He could invest $150 of that, leaving himself $70 a month for anything fun. Or he could use the whole $220 for breathing room, going out on weekends, replacing the shoes that were falling apart, feeling human. He chose the breathing room. For 3 years, he invested nothing. Zero. He told himself that once he got promoted and was making $65,000, he'd start. He got promoted at 25. His salary jumped to $62,000. His expenses rose to match. A nicer apartment at $1,650. A newer car. Better clothes for the new role. By the time the lifestyle inflated, his discretionary income was actually less than it had been at $46,000. The window he was waiting for never opened, because every time his income went up, his spending expanded to fill it. Now let me introduce you to Terrence's former roommate, Ava. Same school, same year, same starting salary, same debt. Ava did one thing differently. During her first week at her new job, before she had a chance to anchor her spending at any particular level, she enrolled in her employer's 401k and set her contribution to 6%. Her company matched 3%, so 9% of her salary started flowing into investments before she ever saw it in her paycheck. She never felt the missing money because she never had it. Her take-home pay was what it was from day one, and she built her lifestyle around that slightly lower number. By 25, Ava had roughly $24,000 invested, including employer match and market growth. Terrence had zero. By 30, Ava had approximately $67,000. Terrence, who finally started investing at 27 after 2 more years of delay, had roughly $22,000. Same starting point, same city, same jobs. Ava had 3 times his retirement balance, and the gap will only widen with every passing year because her money has been compounding longer. She didn't earn more. She didn't live in deprivation. She didn't discover some secret investment. She started 3 years earlier and automated the process before her brain could talk her out of it. This is not financial advice, but the data on what happens when people in their 20s automate early contributions is so overwhelming that ignoring it should come with a warning label. 8 out of 10 millionaires in the Ramsey Solutions National Study invested through their employer's 401k plan. The majority of them started in their 20s. They didn't start with large amounts. They started with whatever they had, and they never stopped. 42.8 million Americans currently hold federal student loan debt. The average balance is roughly $39,500. The average monthly payment runs between $390 and $434. These are real numbers creating real pressure. I am not dismissing that. But I need you to understand something about how the math of investing versus debt repayment works in your 20s, because this is where most people get stuck. If your student loans carry an interest rate of 5 to 6%, and your employer's 401k offers a 3 to 6% match, and historical market returns average 8 to 10% over long periods, then investing enough to capture the full employer match while making standard payments on your student loans is mathematically superior to throwing every available dollar at the loans and investing nothing. The match alone is a 50 to 100% instant return on your contribution. No investment in the world reliably beats that. High-interest debt, anything above 8 or 9% like credit cards, should be attacked aggressively. But moderate-rate student loans can coexist with early investing. You don't have to choose one or the other. The optimal path for most people in their 20s is doing both simultaneously. Now let me talk about the second trap of your 20s, because delay isn't the only thing that will cost you in this decade. Lifestyle establishment is the moment you set your spending baseline, and it happens almost entirely in your 20s. This is different from lifestyle creep, which is what happens when your income rises and your spending rises to match. Lifestyle establishment occurs first. It's the floor. It's the level of spending below which your brain interprets as deprivation. Once it's set, it almost never moves downward voluntarily. Here's what this looks like in practice. You graduate and move into your first apartment. You choose the one that costs $1,300 instead of the one that costs $950 because the nicer one has in-unit laundry and better lighting. Totally reasonable. You finance a car because public transit in your city is unreliable. You pick the $26,000 Civic instead of the $14,000 used Corolla because the Civic is newer and has a better sound system. Fair enough? You subscribe to Netflix, Spotify, a meal kit service, and a fitness app. $28, $11, $49, and $15. Together, that's $103 a month, and each one feels minor when you add it individually. Within 3 months of starting your first real job, you've established a monthly fixed cost structure of roughly $3,100. Your take-home pay is about $3,600. That leaves $500 a month for everything else. Groceries, gas, going out, unexpected expenses, investing. The gap between your income and your locked-in expenses is 14%. That is your wealth-building capacity, and it's been defined in the first 90 days of your working life. A person who set that baseline at $3,100 on a $3,600 take-home has a $500 gap. Invested at 8% over 40 years, that $500 a month becomes roughly $1.7 million. Now, imagine a person with the same take-home who set their baseline at $2,700 by choosing the less glamorous apartment and the used car and cutting 2 subscriptions. Their gap is $900 a month. Same 8%, same 40 years. They arrive at 65 with approximately $3.1 million. The person who spent $400 less per month in their 20s retires with $1.4 million more. The reason this matters so much in your 20s specifically is that baseline stickiness, the psychological phenomenon where spending floors become permanent, means whatever you set now follows you for decades. It's dramatically easier to keep your baseline low from the beginning than to lower it later. Going from $3,100 a month in expenses to $2,700 feels painful and restrictive. Starting at $2,700 and staying there, that just feels like your life. You never miss what you never had. The practical escape for your 20s boils down to four things, and none of them require earning a high salary. First, automate your investing before you build your lifestyle. If your employer offers a 401k, enroll during your first week. Set your contribution rate to at least whatever captures the full employer match. You'll build your spending habits around the lower take-home, and you'll never feel the difference. Second, keep your rent below 25% of your take-home pay. If you bring home $3,600, your rent should be at or below $900. Yes, this might mean a roommate. Yes, this might mean a less trendy neighborhood. The math doesn't care about your preference for exposed brick. It cares about your gap. Third, drive the cheapest reliable car you can find and pay it off in 3 years or less. The average new car payment in America has reached $767 a month. That's $9,200 a year. A used Honda Civic with 80,000 miles on it costs roughly $12,000 and can last another decade with basic maintenance. The annual savings difference between a new car payment and a paid-off used car can easily exceed $7,000, which invested over 40 years at 8% grows to roughly $1.9 million. Your car choice in your 20s might be the single highest leverage financial decision of your entire life. Fourth, build a 3-month emergency fund before you do anything else beyond your 401k contribution. Bankrate reports that 24% of Americans have zero emergency savings, and another 30% don't have enough to cover 3 months of basic expenses. The median emergency savings balance in the U.S. is roughly $600. An emergency fund isn't just a safety net, it's a behavioral shield. Without one, every unexpected expense, a car repair, a medical bill, a job loss, goes straight onto a credit card at 22% interest. That credit card balance starts compounding against you instantly, undoing months of investment gains. An emergency fund keeps you off the high-interest treadmill that traps millions of 20-somethings in a cycle of earning, spending, borrowing, and wondering where everything went. Your 30s. The trap is the housing decision, and it's the most expensive mistake most Americans will ever make. Something shifts in your early 30s that has nothing to do with money and everything to do with identity. You're at a barbecue. Your college friend pulls out her phone and shows you the house she just closed on. 3 bedrooms, backyard, a kitchen island made of quartz. She's beaming. Someone else chimes in about their new build in a subdivision 40 minutes outside the city. Another friend mentions their mortgage rate. Your parents call the following week and ask, casually, when you're going to stop throwing money away on rent. The pressure is cultural before it's financial. You absorb the message from every direction. Renting is temporary. Owning is adulthood. The longer you rent, the further behind you fall. Real Americans buy homes. Real adults build equity. If you're still renting at 33, something must be wrong. Nothing is wrong. But the pressure works anyway. It doesn't operate on logic. It operates on identity. And it pushes millions of people in their 30s into the single largest financial commitment of their lives at exactly the wrong price point, with exactly the wrong assumptions, using exactly the wrong math. Let me show you how the trap actually functions, step by step. You earn $85,000 a year. Your take-home, after federal and state taxes, is roughly $5,600 per month. You've saved $22,000 for a down payment, which you feel proud of because it took you 3 years. You start shopping. You find a home listed at $375,000. Your real estate agent tells you it's a great starter home. Your lender pre-approves you for up to $420,000. The lender uses a debt-to-income ratio of 43%, which is the maximum allowed under qualified mortgage rules. That means the bank is telling you it's perfectly acceptable for 43% of your gross income before taxes to go toward debt payments. On $85,000, 43% of gross is roughly $3,045 a month in total debt service. After subtracting your car payment of $312 and your student loan payment of $290, The bank says you can handle a mortgage payment of roughly $2,443. That translates to a purchase price somewhere around $400,000, depending on your interest rate and property taxes. So you buy the $375,000 house feeling like you've been conservative. You stayed below your pre-approval ceiling. Responsible, right? Here's where the math gets ugly. Your mortgage payment at 6.5% on a 30-year fixed loan with 5.8% down is roughly $2,212 per month for principal and interest. Property taxes add another $310. Homeowners insurance adds $170. If there's an HOA, that could be another $150 to $300. Your actual monthly housing cost is somewhere between $2,692 and $2,992. On a $5,600 take-home, that housing cost consumes 48 to 53% of your after-tax income. You've just signed a 30-year contract committing more than half of every dollar you bring home to a single line item. You subtracted your car payment and student loans, and suddenly you're looking at a monthly budget where housing, transportation, and debt service together eat over 70% of your take-home pay. Your gap, the space between what you earn and what you're obligated to spend, just collapsed. And the gap is everything. The gap is what funds your investments. The gap is what fills your emergency fund. The gap is what lets you absorb a job loss or a medical emergency without sliding into credit card debt. When the gap shrinks to near zero, you're not building wealth anymore. You're running a break-even operation with your own life, and one unexpected expense away from going negative. The National Association of Realtors reported in late 2025 that the average age of a first-time homebuyer has risen to 40 years old. 40. That's up from 31 in 2013. The share of first-time buyers has plummeted to just 21% of all home purchases, the lowest in recorded history, a 50% contraction since 2007. These numbers aren't just statistics. They're describing a market that has priced out a generation, and the people who do manage to buy are often stretching themselves catastrophically thin to do it. A Redfin survey from late 2025 found that 13% of millennial and Gen Z buyers pulled money out of retirement accounts early to fund their down payment. Think about what that means. They're withdrawing money that was growing at an average of 8 to 10% annually, paying a 10% early withdrawal penalty on top of income taxes, and using the remaining proceeds to make a down payment on a property that historically appreciates at 3 to 4% per year before maintenance, taxes, and insurance. Let me make that concrete. Imagine a 32-year-old withdraws $25,000 from their 401k for a down payment. After the 10% penalty and a 22% federal tax bracket, they net roughly $17,000. That $25,000, left untouched in the 401k at 8% average returns, would have been worth approximately $170,000 by age 65. They just traded $170,000 in future retirement wealth for $17,000 in present housing equity. The trade ratio is roughly 10 to 1 against them. Now, here's something I need to be really clear about, because I don't want this to sound like I'm anti-home ownership. I'm not. Owning a home can absolutely be a wealth-building tool. Over the long run, real estate tends to appreciate, and a fixed-rate mortgage provides a hedge against rising rents. Home ownership is also one of the primary ways the average American builds net worth over a lifetime. The issue isn't whether to buy. The issue is how much house to buy, when to buy it, and what you sacrifice to make the purchase happen. The people who build wealth through home ownership are the ones who buy below their means. They purchase the house that costs 2/3 of what the bank says they can afford, not the one that maxes out their approval. They put down 10 to 20% without rating retirement accounts. They choose the 15-year mortgage that has higher monthly payments but saves them tens of thousands in interest. Or they aggressively pay extra on a 30-year. They treat the house as shelter first and an investment second, which means they're not over-allocating to real estate at the expense of every other financial priority. The people who get trapped by homeownership are the ones who buy at the edge of their approval, put down the minimum, stretch to a 30-year mortgage, and then discover that the monthly housing cost leaves no room for anything else. They stop contributing to retirement. They build zero liquid savings. They fund home repairs with credit cards. Their net worth is technically growing through equity, but they can't access that equity without selling the house or taking on more debt through a HELOC. They're homeowners in the cultural sense, but they're financially more fragile than the renter who saves the difference and invests it. Let me give you a comparison that makes the math visceral. Keisha and Lamar are a couple in their early 30s earning a combined $120,000. Their take-home is roughly $7,800 a month. They're choosing between two paths. Path A. They buy a house at $410,000 with 5% down. Their all-in monthly housing cost, including mortgage, taxes, insurance, and maintenance, is $3,400. They have $4,400 left for everything else. After transportation, food, utilities, and basic expenses, their investable gap is $300 a month. They contribute $300 to retirement. Over 30 years at 8%, that becomes roughly $440,000. They also build roughly $160,000 in home equity, assuming 3% annual appreciation minus their remaining mortgage balance. Total net worth contribution from this path, roughly $600,000. Path B. They continue renting at $2,100 a month. Their investable gap is $1,600 a month. Same income, same expenses, just a lower housing cost. Over 30 years at 8%, that $1,600 a month becomes roughly $2.3 million. They have zero home equity. Their total net worth contribution from this path, roughly $2.3 million. Path B produces almost 4 times the wealth of Path A. Even if you add the full home equity to Path A's total, it's still less than a third of Path B. I'm not saying renting is always better than buying. I'm saying that buying a house that's too expensive and crushing your investable gap in the process is one of the most reliable ways to destroy long-term wealth that exists in American financial life. The escape for your 30s housing decision comes down to a few hard rules. Keep your total housing cost. That means mortgage principal and interest, property taxes, homeowners insurance, HOA fees, and a monthly maintenance reserve below 28% of your gross income. Not 43%, not 36%, 28%. On a household income of $100,000, that caps your total housing cost at roughly $2,330 per month. If a house in your area requires more than that at current mortgage rates, you either need a bigger down payment, a less expensive house, or more patience. Save a genuine 10 to 20% down payment through actual saving, meaning new money from your income, and never, under any circumstances, pull from retirement accounts to fund it. If saving the down payment takes 3 extra years of renting, those 3 years will pay for themselves many times over in retirement wealth that was allowed to keep compounding instead of being withdrawn, penalized, and taxed. Before you buy, stress test your budget at the new housing cost. Run the numbers with the full mortgage payment for 3 months while still renting. Put the difference between your current rent and the projected mortgage payment into a separate savings account. If your budget survives 3 months at the higher cost without credit card debt creeping in, without skipping retirement contributions, and without draining your emergency fund, you can probably handle the house. If those 3 months are a struggle, the house is too expensive, regardless of what the bank approved. That's the housing trap. Let me talk about the other trap that defines your 30s, because it operates in the background of the housing decision and makes everything worse. Debt normalization. By your early 30s, you've likely accumulated several layers of debt. The student loans are still lingering for many. You've got a car payment, you probably have a credit card balance that you intended to pay off last month but didn't, and the month before that you said the same thing. If you bought a house, you've got a mortgage. Added together, these obligations create a monthly outflow that starts to feel permanent, like rent, like a utility bill, like a fixed feature of your financial landscape that can be managed but never eliminated. This is the moment debt stops feeling like a crisis and starts feeling like a fact of life. That transition is the most dangerous thing that can happen to your 30s. A Bankrate 2026 survey found that 49% of Americans now describe credit card debt as normal. Among millennials and Gen X, the two generations currently in their 30s and 40s, 53% carry a revolving credit card balance month to month. The average credit card balance per person is roughly $6,500 at a 22.4% APR. Let me slow down on that APR because most people don't understand what 22.4% interest actually does to a balance over time. If you owe $6,500 at 22.4% and pay only the minimum, which is typically 1 to 2% of the balance, or a fixed floor, like $25, here's what happens. It takes over 18 years to pay off. You pay more than $9,000 in interest. Your total cost for $6,500 in purchases ends up being approximately $15,500. You pay for everything twice and then some. Total U.S. credit card debt crossed $1.277 trillion by the end of 2025. That's trillion with a T. It's the highest level since the Federal Reserve Bank of New York began tracking this figure in 1999. It's up 66% in just 5 years. And the interest rate environment is brutal. Average APRs on credit cards carrying a balance were at 22.83% as of January 2026. Even if the Federal Reserve cuts rates further, credit card rates are structurally sticky. They don't come down quickly or proportionally. The card companies have no incentive to lower them because the behavioral data tells them most cardholders will keep paying the minimum regardless. Here's the part that connects debt normalization to everything else in your 30s. Every dollar servicing high-interest debt is a dollar that cannot be invested. The opportunity cost isn't just the dollar itself, it's what that dollar would have become over the remaining decades of your working life. $100 a month diverted from credit card minimum payments to investment at 8% over 30 years becomes roughly $147,000. That's the true cost of carrying a revolving credit card balance in your 30s. It's not the $6,500 you owe, it's the six-figure sum you'll never build because those monthly payments kept flowing to Chase and Capital One instead of into your future. The escape from the debt normalization trap requires a psychological shift before a tactical one. You have to stop treating consumer debt as normal. It's not normal. It's a wealth emergency. The moment you mentally reclassify your credit card balance from a thing I'm managing to a financial fire that is actively burning my future, your behavior will change. Urgency reshapes priorities in ways that good intentions never do. Tactically, the escape works like this. List every debt you carry. Balance, interest rate, minimum payment. Sort by interest rate, highest first. Direct every available dollar above minimums toward the highest rate debt until it's eliminated. Then roll that payment into the next highest. This is the avalanche method, and it's mathematically optimal because it eliminates the most expensive debt first. If you need a psychological win to keep going, the snowball method, where you pay off the smallest balance first regardless of rate, also works. The behavioral research on this is clear. People who use the snowball method are more likely to stick with their debt payoff plan because the early victories create momentum. Either method works if you commit to it. What doesn't work is paying minimums across all accounts and telling yourself you'll deal with it later. Later is where wealth goes to die. While you're eliminating debt, do not stop investing entirely. Maintain at least enough contribution to your 401k to capture the full employer match. The match is a guaranteed 50 to 100% return on your contribution, and no credit card interest rate is high enough to justify walking away from that. Once the high-interest debt is gone, redirect those former debt payments into increased retirement contributions. Your investing rate should ramp up as your debt obligations disappear. The goal by the end of your 30s is to carry zero high-interest consumer debt and be contributing at least 15% of your income to retirement accounts. There's one more dimension of the 30s trap I need to address because it's specific to this decade, and it compounds both the housing trap and the debt normalization trap. Children. The USDA estimates that the cost of raising a child from birth to 18 is approximately $233,610, and that figure doesn't include college. Adjusted for current inflation and regional variation, the real number in 2026 is closer to $300,000 in most metropolitan areas. Daycare alone averages $1,230 per month nationally, with some cities running well above $2,000. For dual-income households, childcare can easily become the third or fourth largest monthly expense, sometimes rivaling the mortgage itself. Children are obviously not a financial decision. They're a life decision that has enormous financial implications. The trap isn't having kids. The trap is having kids without adjusting your financial infrastructure to absorb the cost, which means most couples go into parenthood with the same budget they had as a childless couple and try to cram a $15,000 annual daycare bill into a structure that wasn't designed for it. Something has to give. Usually what gives is retirement contributions, emergency savings, or both. The escape is pre-planning the financial impact before the child arrives. Model the budget at the new expense level 6 months before the due date. Identify specifically which line items will absorb the childcare cost. If the answer is, we'll cut retirement contributions from 12% to 4%, you need a different answer. Explore every available employer benefit. Dependent Care FS as allow you to set aside up to $5,000 pre-tax for childcare expenses. Some employers offer subsidized backup care. Some states offer childcare tax credits beyond the federal credit. These programs won't eliminate the cost, but stacking them can reduce it by 15 to 25% for many families. Your 30s are the decade where the financial complexity of your life multiplies. You're managing more accounts, more obligations, and more competing priorities than ever before. The trap isn't any single decision. It's the accumulation of decisions made under pressure, with incomplete information, shaped by cultural expectations that don't align with mathematical reality. The house the bank approved you for isn't the house you can afford. The credit card balance that feels manageable is quietly compounding against you. The retirement contribution you cut to afford daycare is costing you $5 to $10 for every $1 you redirected. The common thread in every 30s trap is the same. The math says one thing, the culture says another. The culture is louder. The math is right. Your 40s. The trap is the squeeze, and it comes from every direction at once. You wake up on your 40th birthday and something has shifted that you can't quite name. Financially, this is supposed to be the decade where everything clicks. You're earning the most you've ever earned. Your career has matured. You've accumulated some experience, some seniority, maybe a title that would have impressed the 24-year-old version of you. The paychecks are bigger than they've ever been. Your household income might be touching 6 figures for the first time, or it crossed that line a few years ago and now sits somewhere in the $120,000 to $170,000 range that should, in theory, make everything comfortable. It doesn't feel comfortable. It feels like drowning in slow motion while everyone around you assumes you're swimming. The squeeze gets its name from the 2 generational forces pressing inward on your finances simultaneously. Below you are your children, whose needs and expenses escalate every single year. Above you are your aging parents, whose health and independence are beginning to decline in ways that cost money, time, or both. You are the filling in this sandwich, and the bread is getting heavier on both sides at the same time your retirement timeline is quietly shrinking from decades away to closer than I'd like to think about. Let me paint the full picture of what the 40s actually look like financially for a typical American household, because the numbers are critical to understanding why this decade's trap is so effective. The Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances shows that the average net worth for households headed by someone aged 35 to 44 is approximately $589,000. But the median, the number that actually represents the typical household, is only $135,000. That gap between average and median is enormous, and it tells you everything you need to know. A small number of families in this age range have built significant wealth, often through real estate appreciation, business ownership, or early aggressive investing. The vast majority have not. They've been running the treadmill, earning more each year but spending more to match, and arriving at 40 with a net worth that wouldn't fund 5 years of retirement, let alone 25. The Empower data on retirement savings by age tells a similar story. Americans in their 40s have an average retirement savings balance of roughly $650,000, but the median sits around $215,000. The median is the number that matters because it strips out the effect of ultra-high savers pulling the average upward. $215,000 in retirement savings at 45, with 20 to 22 years until a traditional retirement age, means you need your investments to roughly quadruple to hit the $1 million mark that most financial planners suggest as a baseline for a modest retirement. Quadrupling in 20 years requires an annualized return of about 7.2%, with zero additional contributions, which means the money you've saved has to perform perfectly while you also keep adding to it aggressively. There is no margin for error. There is no decade to coast. Your 40s are the make or break window for retirement preparation, and most people spend this decade financially paralyzed because the squeeze makes everything feel urgent and nothing feels possible. Let me break down the specific pressure points, because the squeeze isn't one problem. It's 4 problems sitting on top of each other. Pressure point 1, the college countdown. Your child is 15, maybe 13, maybe 10. Regardless of their exact age, the looming cost of higher education has started appearing in your peripheral vision, and it's getting harder to ignore. You've seen the numbers. The average cost of a 4-year public university, including tuition, fees, room, and board, is now approaching $110,000 for an in-state student. Private universities run between $220,000 and $320,000 for 4 years. Even community college, often positioned as the affordable path, can cost $30,000 to $40,000 for 2 years when you include living expenses and transportation. 47% of the class of 2024 who graduated from 4-year public and private nonprofit colleges left school with student loan debt, carrying an average of $29,560. You look at that number and you feel something deep and primal. You don't want your kid carrying that weight. You know what it did to you. You know what it did to your friends. The instinct to protect them from it is overwhelming. So you start making changes. You open a 529 plan, which is good, but then you look at how much you'd need to deposit monthly to cover 4 years at a public university. And the number is somewhere between $500 and $800 a month if you're starting when your child is 12 or 13. That money has to come from somewhere. And the somewhere for millions of American parents in their 40s is their retirement contributions. This is the trap. It's disguised as love. It feels like sacrifice. It looks like good parenting. It is, mathematically, one of the most destructive financial decisions you can make. Here's why. Your child can borrow for college. There are federal student loans, private student loans, scholarships, Pell Grants, work-study programs, tuition payment plans, community college transfer paths that cut costs by 40 to 60%, and income-driven repayment plans that cap post-graduation payments at a percentage of discretionary income. The infrastructure for funding education with borrowed money, imperfect as it is, exists and is accessible. You cannot borrow for retirement. There is no retirement loan. There is no government program that writes you a check when you're 68 and your savings have run out. There is no income-driven repayment plan for being old and broke. Social Security provides a baseline, but the average monthly benefit is roughly $2,000, which in most American cities barely covers rent and groceries, let alone healthcare, transportation, and anything resembling quality of life. Every dollar you divert from retirement contributions in your 40s to fund your child's education costs you between $4 and $6 in retirement wealth, because those dollars lose 15 to 20 years of compounding. A $500 monthly reduction in your 401k contribution from age 42 to age 50, 8 years of reduced saving to cover the college years, costs you roughly $132,000 at an 8% average return by age 65. If you extend that reduction to cover a second child, the cost doubles. That's $250,000 in retirement wealth that quietly vanished while you were writing tuition checks. I know this is hard to hear. I know that every cell in your body wants to give your child a debt-free start. But consider this. If you arrive at 67 underfunded and unable to support yourself, the financial burden shifts to those same children. They'll be in their late 30s or early 40s, in the peak of their own squeeze, and they'll be writing checks to support a parent whose retirement account ran dry because it was rated to fund their education 2 decades earlier. The loving thing, the truly protective thing, is to fully fund your own retirement first and help with college from whatever remains after that priority is secured. Let me show you a concrete example. James and Camille are both 43, combined income of $148,000. They have a 14-year-old son and a 12-year-old daughter. Their current 401k balances total $261,000. They've been contributing 11% combined, and their employer matches add another 4%. Path A. James and Camille cut their 401k contributions to 4%, keeping only the employer match, and redirect the remaining 7%, roughly $860 a month, into 529 plans for both kids. They do this for 8 years, covering both children through college enrollment. Over those 8 years, they've accumulated roughly $92,000 in 529 savings, assuming moderate growth. Their 401k, meanwhile, grew from $261,000 to roughly $480,000, instead of the $672,000 it would have reached at the original contribution rate. The gap is $192,000. By retirement at 67, that $192,000 gap, with 15 more years of compounding at 8%, has widened to approximately $610,000 in lost retirement wealth. Path B. James and Camille maintain their 11% contribution rate throughout, keeping retirement sacred. They save $250 a month per child in 529 plans by cutting dining out, reducing subscriptions, and driving their cars an extra 2 years before replacing them. After 8 years, they've accumulated roughly $52,000 in 529 savings. Their kids each have about $26,000 toward college. The remaining cost is covered through a combination of scholarships, federal student loans, community college for the first 2 years, and a part-time campus job. Each child graduates with approximately $22,000 in student debt, which at current federal rates carries a monthly payment of roughly $230 on a standard 10-year plan. James and Camille's 401k reaches $672,000 at age 51 and continues compounding to over $1.5 million by 67. Path A gave each child a debt-free diploma and left James and Camille $610,000 short in retirement. Path B gave each child $22,000 in manageable student debt and left James and Camille fully funded. Their children's student loan payments total $230 a month for 10 years. James and Camille's retirement shortfall under Path A would have required them to either work an additional 6 to 8 years or accept a significantly diminished standard of living for the rest of their lives. The math is uncomfortable because the emotional logic points in the opposite direction, but the math is correct. The practical escape from the college pressure trap is to establish a clear financial hierarchy and communicate it to your family. Retirement contributions come first. At minimum, contribute enough to capture the full employer match. Ideally, push toward 15% of household income going to retirement savings throughout your 40s. College savings come second, funded from whatever margin remains after retirement is fully protected. Have an honest conversation with your children about the cost of college, the availability of scholarships and financial aid, the value of community college pathways, and the reality that some student debt is manageable while an underfunded retirement is catastrophic. These conversations aren't fun. They are among the most valuable things you will ever do as a parent. Pressure point 2, aging parents. According to AARP, Roughly 38 million Americans serve as unpaid caregivers for an adult family member. The typical caregiver is a woman in her late 40s or early 50s, and she spends an average of 24 hours per week on caregiving tasks, which is the equivalent of a part-time job. The out-of-pocket costs average roughly $7,200 per year, covering everything from medications and medical supplies to home modifications and transportation to appointments. But the direct costs are only part of the story. The indirect costs, reduced work hours, passed over promotions, career exits, paused retirement contributions, are often far larger. A MetLife study estimated that the average female caregiver loses $304,000 in lifetime income and benefits due to caregiving responsibilities. That includes lost wages, lost Social Security credits from reduced earning years, and lost retirement contributions during the peak saving decade. The trap isn't that you care for your parents. The trap is that the caregiving arrives without a plan, and the financial infrastructure to handle it was never built. Your parents' medical expenses start hitting your credit card. You reduce your hours to drive them to appointments. Your employer doesn't offer flexible scheduling, so you burn through PTO and then start taking unpaid days. Each of these adjustments feels temporary, just until dad gets through this surgery, just until mom's medication stabilizes. But chronic conditions don't resolve, they progress. What started as a temporary support role becomes a permanent financial drain that erodes your own retirement timeline month by month. The escape here starts with a conversation that most families avoid until a crisis forces it. You need to understand your parents' financial situation before they need your help. Do they have long-term care insurance? What does their Medicare coverage include and exclude? What are their monthly income sources? Do they have savings? And how long would it last if they needed in-home care at $4,000 to $5,000 a month, which is roughly the national average for a home health aide? Do they have an estate plan, a power of attorney, an advanced healthcare directive? These questions feel invasive. Asking them feels like you're overstepping. I understand that. But the cost of not asking is exponentially higher than the discomfort of the conversation. Long-term care insurance purchased in your parents' 60s costs a fraction of what paying for care out of pocket costs in their 80s. A Medicaid planning conversation with an elder law attorney can protect family assets while ensuring your parents receive the care they need. Community resources, adult day programs, respite care, Meals on Wheels, veterans benefits if applicable, can reduce the financial burden on family caregivers significantly. None of these solutions are available in a crisis. All of them are available with advanced planning. Pressure point 3, the career plateau. Something happens to earnings growth in the mid-40s that most people don't anticipate. According to Bureau of Labor Statistics data, median weekly earnings peak for men between ages 45 and 54, and for women between 35 and 44. That means for many households, the rapid income growth that characterized their 30s has already slowed or stopped entirely. You're at or near your maximum earning potential, and the raises from here forward will be smaller, less frequent, and more closely tied to inflation than to promotion. This matters because the squeeze demands more money at the exact moment your income trajectory is flattening. You need more for college, more for aging parents, more for retirement catch-up, more for healthcare as your own body starts requiring more maintenance. But the annual raises that used to feel like relief valves, those 3 to 5% bumps that gave you room to absorb new costs, are now barely keeping pace with inflation. Your purchasing power isn't growing. Your obligations are. The trap is expecting your income to solve the squeeze when your income has already peaked. The escape is expense management and strategic reallocation, not income growth. In your 20s and 30s, earning more was a viable solution to most financial pressure. In your 40s, the solution shifts to deploying what you earn more efficiently. This is the decade where every dollar needs an assignment, where the budget stops being a suggestion and becomes a binding document, where subscriptions get audited, dining habits get restructured, car decisions get recalibrated, and every recurring expense gets interrogated against the hierarchy of retirement, emergency savings, debt elimination, and then everything else. I realize this section has been intense. The 40s are intense. This is the decade that separates people who build wealth from people who spend the next 20 years trying to recover from decisions they made under pressure between 40 and 50. The squeeze is real. The college costs are real. The aging parents are real. The career plateau is real. None of these pressures can be wished away, but they can be managed with a plan that prioritizes correctly, even when the emotional pull of the moment is screaming at you to prioritize the wrong thing. Pressure point 4, the silent killer of the 40s, healthcare costs. This one creeps in so quietly that most people don't even classify it as a financial trap until it's already taken a significant bite. In your 20s and 30s, you might visit the doctor once a year for a physical. Maybe you fill a prescription occasionally. Your health insurance premium is the cheapest tier because you barely use it. In your 40s, things start changing. Your back needs attention. Your knees ache after running. Your blood work comes back with a number that's elevated for the first time. Your spouse needs a specialist referral. Your child needs braces, which average $5,000 to $7,000. You start using healthcare the way the system was designed to be used, and you discover that good insurance still means thousands in deductibles, co-pays, and out-of-network charges. The average annual healthcare expenditure per person in the United States is over $12,000, and that number climbs steeply after age 45. Americans spend approximately 8% of their total annual budget on healthcare, but for middle-aged households with children, the effective rate can be significantly higher when you add dental, vision, orthodontics, and the premium increases that come with family coverage. The escape is twofold. First, if your employer offers a high-deductible health plan paired with a health savings account, consider it seriously. HSA contributions are tax-deductible, grow tax-free, and can be withdrawn tax-free for qualified medical expenses. In 2026, the family contribution limit for an HSA is $8,300. The HSA is the only account in the tax code that offers a triple tax advantage, and it can function as a stealth retirement account if you pay current medical expenses out of pocket and let the HSA balance compound for decades. A family contributing $6,000 a year to an HSA from age 40 to 65 at 7% average returns would accumulate roughly $400,000, earmarked for healthcare expenses in retirement, which is when you'll need it most. Second, build healthcare costs into your monthly budget as a line item, not an afterthought. Most households budget for rent, transportation, and food, but treat medical expenses as unpredictable surprises. They're not unpredictable. They're statistically certain. The only uncertainty is the specific month they'll arrive. Budget $200 to $400 a month for out-of-pocket healthcare costs, depending on your family size and plan structure, and put it in a dedicated savings account or HSA. When the dental bill or the specialist copay or the physical therapy sessions arrive, the money is there. No credit card required, no retirement account rated, no financial emergency created by a predictable expense. Let me tie the 40s together with the core principle that makes the escape from the squeeze possible. Your 40s demand triage. Not everything can be fully funded simultaneously. There is not enough income in most American households to maximally contribute to retirement, fully fund 529 plans, support aging parents, eliminate debt, build emergency savings, and maintain a comfortable lifestyle all at the same time. Pretending otherwise is how people end up doing none of these things well. The triage order matters, and the correct order, based on every piece of financial research and planning framework I've studied, is this. First, contribute enough to retirement to capture the full employer match. Second, build or maintain a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. Third, eliminate all high-interest consumer debt. Fourth, increase retirement contributions toward 15% of household income. Fifth, fund children's education savings. Sixth, Support aging parents from remaining discretionary funds, community resources, and long-term care planning. Seventh, everything else. Notice that retirement appears twice in the hierarchy, at positions 1 and 4, before college funding. That ordering is intentional, and it is not negotiable if your goal is to avoid becoming a financial burden on your children later. The oxygen mask analogy applies here exactly as it does on an airplane. Secure your own mask first. You cannot help anyone if you've passed out financially in your late 60s because you spent your 40s funding everyone else's needs before your own. Your 50s. The trap is the panic catch-up, and it will either accelerate your wealth or destroy it, depending on which version of panic you choose. There's a moment in your early 50s that almost everyone describes the same way. You're at your desk, or you're lying in bed at 11 p.m., or you're sitting in the parking lot after your kid's soccer game, and you open your retirement account for the first time in a while. Not a glance, not a quick check of the number, a real look. You pull up the balance. You pull up the projected monthly income at 67. You pull up one of those retirement calculators that asks for your current savings, your annual contribution, your expected return, and the age you want to stop working. You plug in the numbers. The output hits you somewhere between your chest and your stomach. It's not enough. It might not even be close to enough. The calculator says you need $1.2 million to maintain your current lifestyle in retirement. You have $340,000. The gap is $860,000, and you have maybe 15 years to close it. A voice in the back of your head, the one you've been silencing for a decade, finally gets loud enough to hear. You should have started earlier. You should have contributed more. You should have paid attention. That voice is not helpful. What's helpful is understanding the specific trap that this moment creates, because the panic itself is the danger, not the shortfall. According to Fidelity's fourth quarter 2025 report, the average 401k balance for Gen X participants who are currently in their mid-40s to early 60s is $222,100. For baby boomers still in employer plans, the average is $270,800. These are the averages, which include both diligent savers and people who started late. The Vanguard 2025 How America Saves report shows a median defined contribution plan balance of only about $55,000 across all participants. Median. That means half of all retirement savers have less than $55,000. Empower's data, which skews toward more engaged investors, shows a more optimistic picture. Americans in their 50s have an average retirement savings of roughly $1,020,000, but the median is about $438,000. For people in their early 50s who haven't been maximizing contributions for decades, the reality is likely somewhere between the Vanguard median and the Empower median, somewhere between $100,000 and $300,000, with a retirement timeline of 12 to 18 years. Northwestern Mutual's 2026 Planning and Progress study found that Americans now believe they need $1.46 million to retire comfortably. That's up $200,000 from just 1 year earlier. Whether $1.46 million is the right number for you depends on your lifestyle, your location, your health, and a dozen other variables. But the psychological effect of seeing a target that large next to a savings balance that's a fraction of it is what triggers the panic. And the panic produces two equally destructive responses. Response 1 is risk escalation. You look at the gap between where you are and where you need to be, and you conclude that conservative investing will never get you there in time. The math appears to support this. If you have $300,000 and you need $1.2 million in 15 years, you need roughly a 10% annualized return with zero additional contributions to close the gap through growth alone. That's above the long-term historical average of the S&P 500. So your brain starts reaching for higher returns. Individual stocks instead of index funds. Concentrated bets on sectors you've read about. Speculative assets. Maybe a friend mentioned a private investment opportunity that promises 15 to 20% returns. Maybe you've been reading about cryptocurrency, and you think a well-timed entry could compress a decade of saving into 3 years of gains. Here's what the math actually says about risk escalation in your 50s. A diversified portfolio might decline 30 to 40% in a severe market correction. These corrections happen roughly once per decade. If you're 52 and your $300,000 portfolio drops 35%, you're suddenly sitting on $195,000. To recover to your previous balance, you need a 54% gain, which historically takes 3 to 5 years in a diversified portfolio and significantly longer in concentrated positions. You've just lost 3 to 5 years of compounding time that you cannot afford to lose. The 10-year window between 52 and 62 is supposed to be your highest growth period because your balance is large enough for compounding to generate significant absolute dollar gains. A $50,000 balance growing at 8% adds $4,000 a year. A $300,000 balance growing at 8% adds $24,000. The bigger the base, the harder compounding works. Destroying that base through speculative losses in your 50s is the financial equivalent of burning your house down to collect the insurance, except there's no insurance. The data on what happens to people who chase returns in their 50s is grim. A Dalbar study consistently shows that the average equity investor underperforms the S&P 500 by roughly 3 to 4 percentage points per year, largely because of behavioral errors. Buying high, selling low, chasing hot sectors, panic selling during corrections. These errors cost more in your 50s than at any other age because the dollar amounts are larger and the recovery time is shorter. A 3% annual underperformance on a $300,000 portfolio over 15 years costs you roughly $230,000, compared to simply holding a diversified index fund. That's more than most people contribute to their 401k in an entire decade. Response 2 is the opposite extreme, and it's equally destructive: paralysis. You look at the gap, feel overwhelmed by its size, and mentally check out. You stop looking at your accounts. You leave your contribution rate wherever it's been for the past 5 years. You don't increase it after raises. You don't rebalance. You don't explore catch-up provisions. You tell yourself, sometimes out loud, that it's too late to make a meaningful difference, so you might as well focus on enjoying the present and hope something works out. This is the financial equivalent of a student who's behind in a class, deciding not to study for the final because the semester already feels lost. The final is worth 40% of the grade. Your 50s and early 60s are worth 40% of your retirement. Let me show you exactly how much wealth can be built between 50 and 65, because the numbers will surprise people who think the window has closed. The 2026 contribution limit for a 401k is $24,500. If you're 50 or older, you qualify for catch-up contributions, which add $8,000 to that limit, bringing your total possible annual contribution to $32,500. If you're between 60 and 63, the Secure 2.0 Act created a super catch-up provision that increases the catch-up amount to $11,250, allowing a total annual contribution of $35,750. Let me run the numbers on what aggressive saving in your 50s actually produces. Assume you're 50, you have $250,000 currently saved, and you start contributing $32,500 per year, the maximum with catch-up. Assume a 7% average annual return, which is conservative for a balanced portfolio over 15 years. By 65, your $250,000 grows to roughly $688,000 through compounding alone. Your annual contributions of $32,500 per year over 15 years, also compounding at 7%, add approximately $816,000. Your total at 65 is approximately $1.5 million, from $250,000 to $1.5 million in 15 years. That's a 6-fold increase. Your 50s and early 60s, far from being too late, are the most powerful wealth-building window available to someone who commits fully. Even more modest numbers are transformative. If you can't max out contributions, let's say you contribute $20,000 per year, half of which comes from your savings, and half from an employer match. Starting at 50, with 250,000 at 7%, you arrive at 65 with approximately 1.2 million. Still a massive improvement over paralysis. Now compare that to someone who gives up. Same 250,000 at 50. They keep contributing just enough to get the employer match, roughly 5,000 per year in combined employee and employer contributions. At 7%, they arrive at 65 with approximately 812,000. That's still meaningful, but it's 488,000 less than the person who maximized catch-up contributions. Nearly $500,000 in retirement wealth determined entirely by whether you accelerated or coasted during the 15 years after 50. The escape from the panic trap is to reject both risk escalation and paralysis in favor of a third option: disciplined acceleration. This means increasing your contribution rate to the maximum you can sustain, maintaining a diversified, age-appropriate investment allocation, and refusing to let either fear or greed override your long-term strategy. Disciplined acceleration has a specific playbook for your 50s, and each element matters. First, maximize your 401k contributions, including catch-up. If you're 50, your ceiling is $32,500 per year. If money is tight, work backward from your budget. Can you redirect $200 a month from dining out? That's $2,400 a year. Can you drop 2 subscription services? That's another $300. Can you drive your current car 2 more years instead of trading it in? The freed up car payment of $400 to $600 a month goes directly into your 401k. You don't need to find $32,500 in new money, you need to find it in reallocation. And your 50s are the decade where every reallocation dollar has the highest marginal impact on your retirement outcome. Second, if you have access to a Roth IRA and your income qualifies, contribute separately on top of your 401k. The 2026 Roth IRA limit is $7,000 or $8,000 if you're 50 or older with catch-up. Roth contributions grow tax-free and come out tax-free in retirement, which gives you a tax-diversified income stream that can meaningfully reduce your overall tax burden in your 60s and 70s when you're drawing down accounts. Third, this is the decade to eliminate all remaining debt. Every debt payment you carry into retirement is a payment that must be funded from a fixed and declining pool of assets. A household entering retirement with zero debt, no mortgage, no car payment, no credit card balance, needs dramatically less investment income to maintain the same standard of living. Let me put numbers on that. A mortgage payment of $1,800 plus a car payment of $450 plus minimum credit card payments of $130 equals $2,380 per month in debt service. That's $28,560 per year. To generate $28,560 in annual income from a retirement portfolio at a 4% withdrawal rate, you'd need roughly $714,000 invested specifically to service debt. If you eliminate the debt before retirement, you don't need that $714,000. It can instead fund 23 years of groceries or 14 years of healthcare premiums or your grandchildren's college funds. Debt elimination in your 50s follows a clear priority order. Pay off credit cards first because the interest rates are highest, typically 22 to 25%. Pay off car loans next because they're mid-rate debt on a depreciating asset. Then consider accelerating your mortgage payoff, especially if you plan to stay in the home through retirement. Some financial planners argue against early mortgage payoff because the interest rate is relatively low and the money could earn more in the market. That argument has mathematical merit, but it ignores the behavioral and psychological value of entering retirement with zero monthly obligations. The peace of mind of a paid-off house has a tangible effect on spending behavior, stress levels, and quality of life in retirement that doesn't show up in a spreadsheet. Fourth, get ruthlessly honest about your retirement timeline and your readiness. This means sitting down with either a financial planner or a comprehensive retirement calculator and running real scenarios. Not fantasies, not aspirational numbers, real inputs. Your current savings, your current contribution rate, your expected Social Security benefit, which you can estimate at ssa.gov, your anticipated monthly expenses in retirement, your healthcare costs, your tax situation, the expected return on your portfolio at a reasonable, not optimistic rate. When you run those numbers, one of three things will happen. You'll discover you're closer than you thought, which is the best outcome and more common than you'd expect because people in the panic tend to underestimate what they have. You'll discover you have a manageable gap that can be closed with increased contributions and a few more working years. Or you'll discover the gap is large enough that you need to make significant lifestyle adjustments, both now and in retirement, to close it. All three of these outcomes are actionable. None of them require panic. None of them require speculative gambles. All of them require honesty and a plan. There's one more trap within the 50s that I need to address, because it catches people who are otherwise doing everything right. It's the premature celebration trap. This one hits people who have saved diligently. They turn 53, they open their retirement account, and the number is actually good. Maybe it's 700,000, maybe it's 900. They see the number, they feel a wave of relief, and they unconsciously take their foot off the gas. Contributions stay flat instead of increasing. Spending loosens up. The urgency that drove the savings behavior for the past decade fades because the perceived crisis has passed. But the crisis hasn't passed. The final 12 to 15 years before retirement are when the absolute dollar growth of your portfolio is greatest, because 7 or 8% of 700,000 generates far more annual growth than 7 or 8% of 200,000 did when you were younger. A $700,000 portfolio at 8% grows by $56,000 in a single year. If you coast during this period by reducing contributions, you're voluntarily walking away from the highest velocity compounding window of your life. Let me show you the cost. Someone with $700,000 at 53 who continues contributing $25,000 a year at 7% arrives at 67 with approximately $2.3 million. The same person who stops contributing at 53 and just lets the $700,000 compound arrives at 67 with approximately $1.7 million. The difference is $600,000, purely from contributions made during the final 14 years. $600,000 left on the table because the number felt good enough at 53. The escape is simple in concept and difficult in execution. Your 50s are not the decade to relax. They're the decade to press harder than you ever have. The balance is bigger. The compounding is working harder. Every dollar you add has more amplification power than any dollar you added in your 20s, 30s, or 40s, because the base it's joining is larger and the return it's generating is on a larger sum. Think of it like pushing a boulder down a hill. In your 20s, you were pushing from the top. The boulder was small and the slope was gentle. Progress felt slow. In your 30s and 40s, the boulder grew and the slope steepened. It was getting heavier, but also gaining momentum. In your 50s, the boulder is massive and the hill is steep. Every additional push, every dollar added, accelerates an already moving mass. Stopping now doesn't mean the boulder stops. It means it rolls without your additional force. But the difference between a boulder that rolls on its own and one you keep pushing is the difference between comfortable and exceptional, between I can retire and I can retire and never worry about money again. Your 50s have one more superpower that most people completely overlook, and I want to make sure you hear this because it might be the most under-discussed advantage in all of retirement planning. Your expenses naturally decline in your 50s if you let them. Your children are leaving the house. Daycare is long gone. School expenses, sports fees, and the relentless cost of feeding teenagers are winding down. Your mortgage, if you bought in your 30s, may be close to payoff or at least significantly reduced in real terms because inflation has eroded the value of those fixed monthly payments over time. Your car might be paid off. Your home might need less renovation because the big projects were done in your 40s. If you capture this natural expense decline and redirect it into savings instead of allowing it to be absorbed by lifestyle expansion, the results are staggering. A couple whose monthly expenses drop by $1,200 when their youngest leaves home and who redirects that full amount into retirement savings for 10 years at 7% adds roughly $207,000 to their portfolio. From money that was already being spent, from expenses that simply ended. The only action required was not expanding spending to fill the void. This is the anti-lifestyle creep moment of your 50s. Your income may have plateaued, but your mandatory expenses are declining for the first time in decades. The gap is widening in your favor naturally if you let it. If you convert that widening gap into accelerated savings, your 50s become the most productive wealth-building decade of your entire life. The people who arrive at 65 with seven-figure portfolios on middle-class incomes are almost always the people who weaponize their 50s, who maxed catch-up contributions, who eliminated debt systematically, who captured the natural expense decline of an emptying nest, who didn't panic and didn't coast, who understood that 15 years of disciplined acceleration on a six-figure base produces outcomes that look, from the outside, like someone who must have earned far more money than they actually did. They didn't earn more. They deployed the final 15 years more intentionally than anyone around them. Your 60s. The trap is the Social Security miscalculation, and it's the single most consequential financial decision most Americans will ever make with the least amount of education behind it. You turn 62. You've been working for roughly 40 years. Your body knows it. Your back knows it. Your knees have started making sounds they didn't make at 45. You're tired in a way that weekends don't fix anymore. And then a letter arrives from the Social Security Administration. Or you log into your My Social Security account online and you see a number. It tells you what you'd receive per month if you claimed right now, today, at 62. The number isn't life-changing, but it's real. It's money that would appear in your bank account every month without you having to earn it. After 4 decades of alarm clocks and commutes and performance reviews and office politics, the idea of money simply showing up feels like oxygen. Your brother-in-law claimed at 62. Your neighbor claimed at 62. The guy at the gym who retired last year told you he was glad he took it early because you never know what could happen. The cultural momentum around early claiming is powerful, and it is, for the majority of Americans, financially devastating. Let me walk through the math with the kind of specificity that the guy at the gym did not provide. For anyone born in 1960 or later, full retirement age for Social Security purposes is 67. That's the age at which you receive 100% of your calculated benefit, known as your primary insurance amount. If you claim before 67, your benefit is permanently reduced. If you claim after 67, up to age 70, your benefit is permanently increased. These adjustments are not temporary. They're not recalculated later. They lock in for the rest of your life, and they apply to every cost of living adjustment you receive from that point forward. Here's what the reduction looks like in real numbers. If your full retirement age benefit is $2,000 per month, claiming at 62 reduces it by 30%. You receive $1,400 per month. That $600 reduction applies every single month for the rest of your life. Over a year, that's $7,200 less. Over a 20-year retirement, that's $144,000 in benefits you will never receive. Now let's look at the other direction. If you delay past 67, Social Security adds delayed retirement credits of 8% per year up to age 70. That same $2,000 benefit becomes $2,480 at 70. That's a 24% permanent increase for waiting 3 years past full retirement age. The difference between claiming at 62 and claiming at 70 on a $2,000 base benefit is $1,080 per month, every month, for life. The maximum monthly Social Security benefit in 2026 tells the story even more starkly. At 62, the maximum is $2,969. At 67, it's $4,207. At 70, It's 5,181. The spread between the earliest and latest claiming ages is over $2,200 per month, over $26,000 per year. Over a 20-year retirement, that difference exceeds $500,000. Yet the majority of Americans claim early. The Social Security Administration's own data shows that a significant plurality of beneficiaries claim at or near 62. The reasons are predictable. They need the money. They're afraid the program will be cut. They don't understand the math. They listened to someone at a barbecue who said, "Take it while you can." Each of these reasons deserves a direct response. I need the money. This is valid for people who have no savings, no other income source, and cannot physically continue working. For them, claiming at 62 is a survival decision, not a strategic one, and there's no judgment in that. But for people who have some retirement savings, a working spouse, or the ability to work part-time, I need the money often means I want to stop working and this makes it possible. The question is whether taking a 30% permanent haircut on your Social Security income is worth starting retirement a few years earlier. For most people, the math says no. A few years of part-time work, portfolio drawdown, or a combination of both to bridge the gap between stopping full-time work and claiming at 67 or 70 typically produces a dramatically better lifetime outcome. Let me make this concrete with a character. Linda is 62. She's a retired office manager from Tampa. Her full retirement age benefit is $2,200 per month. She has $310,000 in her 401k and no pension. Her monthly expenses are $2,800. If Linda claims Social Security at 62, she receives $1,540 per month, a 30% reduction from her full benefit. She still needs $1,260 per month from her retirement savings to cover expenses. That's $15,120 per year drawn from the 401k. Over 8 years until age 70, she'll have withdrawn roughly $121,000, leaving her with approximately $267,000, assuming modest growth on the remaining balance. Her Social Security is permanently locked at $1,540. Now consider the alternative. Linda delays Social Security until 70. For the 8 years between 62 and 70, she draws $2,800 per month entirely from her 401k, which is $33,600 per year. After 8 years, she's withdrawn roughly $269,000, leaving approximately $135,000 in her retirement account, again assuming modest growth on the shrinking balance. But her Social Security benefit is now $2,728 per month permanently. That's $1,188 more per month than the early claiming scenario. In year 1 after turning 70, the delayed benefit generates $14,256 more in annual Social Security income than the early claiming benefit. By the time Linda is 74, the extra Social Security income has already replenished the additional amount she drew from her 401k during the bridge years. Every year after 74, she's better off, permanently, by over $14,000 per year. If Linda lives to 85, the cumulative advantage of delaying is approximately $171,000. If she lives to 90, it exceeds $240,000. The break-even age, the point where total lifetime benefits from delaying surpass total lifetime benefits from claiming early, is typically around 80 to 82. The average 62-year-old woman in the United States lives to approximately 87. The average man lives to about 84, both well past the break-even point. For most Americans, delaying Social Security is the single highest guaranteed return available anywhere in the financial system. 8% per year, adjusted for inflation, with zero market risk. You cannot buy an annuity that good. You cannot find a bond that pays that reliably. It's the best deal in retirement finance, and most people walk past it because they're tired and they want the money now. I'm afraid Social Security will be cut. This fear is understandable but misunderstood. The Social Security Trust Fund faces a projected shortfall in the mid-2030s. If Congress does absolutely nothing, which is historically unlikely, benefits would be reduced to approximately 79% of the scheduled amount, funded entirely by ongoing payroll tax revenue. Social Security would not go to zero. It would be reduced. Congress has addressed solvency issues before. In 1983, by raising the retirement age and adjusting payroll taxes, and virtually every political analyst expects a similar intervention before or shortly after the trust fund shortfall date. Claiming early because you're afraid of future cuts means you're volunteering for a guaranteed 30% permanent reduction right now to avoid a potential 21% reduction that may or may not happen in a decade, and that Congress has strong incentive to prevent. The practical escape for your 60s Social Security decision is to build a bridge strategy. Calculate your monthly expenses. Identify every possible income source between 62 and 70, including part-time work, spousal income, and systematic withdrawals from retirement accounts. If you can fund living expenses through those sources for even 5 additional years, claiming at 67 instead of 62 increases your benefit by 30% for life. If you can bridge all the way to 70, the increase is 77% compared to the 62 benefit. The bridge strategy is not about suffering through 8 years of deprivation. It's about deploying existing resources strategically for a defined period to secure a permanently higher income floor for the rest of your life. The second trap of your 60s is premature and unstructured portfolio distribution. The moment you turn 59 and a half, your retirement accounts become accessible without the 10% early withdrawal penalty. For many people, this milestone creates a psychological shift that's subtle but profound. The money stops feeling like it's off limits. It starts feeling like it's available. Not all of it, of course. You're not going to drain the account. But a kitchen renovation here, a dream vacation there, helping your adult child with a down payment, a new car because the old one has 200,000 miles and you've earned something nice. Each of these withdrawals feels reasonable in isolation. Added together over 5 or 6 years, they can consume a shockingly large percentage of the balance. A study from the Employee Benefit Research Institute found that retirees often spend down their retirement assets faster in the first 5 years of retirement than in any subsequent 5-year period. The early years feel abundant because the balance is at its highest. Spending feels sustainable because the number is big. By the time the rate of drawdown becomes alarming, the compounding engine has been significantly diminished. Let me make this tangible. Robert is 61 with $840,000 in his 401k. Between 61 and 66, he makes the following withdrawals: $35,000 for a kitchen remodel, $18,000 for a 2-week trip to Europe with his wife, $27,000 to help his daughter with a down payment, $14,000 for a used car. Total, $94,000. At 7% average returns, that $94,000 left untouched would have grown to approximately $158,000 by age 75. Robert didn't just spend $94,000. He spent the $94,000 plus the $64,000 it would have generated. He spent $158,000 on a kitchen, a vacation, a gift, and a car. And he might not realize the true cost for another decade, when his portfolio is thinner than it should be and his withdrawal rate is creeping above 5%. The escape from premature distribution is structural, not aspirational. Before you retire, create a written withdrawal policy. Financial planners typically recommend the 4% rule as a starting framework, which means withdrawing no more than 4% of your portfolio value in year 1, then adjusting for inflation each subsequent year. On an $800,000 portfolio, that's $32,000 per year, or roughly $2,667 per month. If your monthly expenses exceed what 4% of your portfolio can support, you have 3 options: reduce expenses, delay retirement and keep saving, generate supplemental income through part-time work. What you do not do is withdraw more than the sustainable rate and hope the market makes up the difference. Hope is not a retirement strategy. It's a recipe for running out of money at 78. Create a separate discretionary fund for the one-time expenses that you know will tempt you: the kitchen renovation, the big trip, the family gifts. Fund this account separately over the 3 to 5 years before retirement by earmarking a portion of your savings specifically for these purposes. When the urge to renovate hits, the money is there, explicitly allocated, without touching the retirement portfolio. This requires planning. It also requires the honesty to admit that these desires are real and that pretending they won't arise is less effective than budgeting for them. The third trap of your 60s is healthcare cost miscalculation. Medicare eligibility begins at 65. Many people assume that means healthcare is covered at 65. It is not. Medicare Part A covers hospital stays and is premium-free for most retirees. But Part B, which covers doctor visits and outpatient care, carries a monthly premium of roughly $185 per person in 2026, and that premium increases with income. Part D, prescription drug coverage, adds another monthly cost. Neither Part A nor Part B covers dental, vision, or hearing, and none of the standard Medicare parts cover long-term care. Supplemental coverage through a Medigap plan or a Medicare Advantage plan closes some of these gaps, but adds additional monthly premiums. When you add up Part B, Part D, a supplemental plan, dental, vision, and out-of-pocket costs for services Medicare doesn't fully cover, the average retired couple can expect to spend between $6,000 and $12,000 per year on healthcare in their 60s, escalating to $15,000 or more in their 70s and 80s as chronic conditions develop and prescription costs climb. Fidelity's annual retirement healthcare cost estimate puts the total at roughly $330,000 for a 65-year-old couple retiring today, covering the span from 65 through the end of life. That's $330,000 in healthcare costs alone after Medicare. This number excludes long-term care, which averages over $104,000 per year for a private room in a nursing facility and over $62,000 for an assisted living community. The escape is threefold. First, if you have access to a health savings account during your working years, maximize it. The triple tax advantage of the HSA, tax-deductible contributions, tax-free growth, and tax-free withdrawals for medical expenses makes it the most powerful healthcare funding vehicle available. HSA funds can be invested and grown for decades, then drawn down in retirement specifically for medical costs. A couple that contributes the family maximum to an HSA for 15 years and invests the balance at 7% can accumulate over $350,000, roughly covering Fidelity's entire estimated healthcare cost for a retired couple. Second, budget healthcare as a primary line item in your retirement plan, not an afterthought. Most retirement planning conversations focus on income replacement, Social Security optimization, and investment allocation. Healthcare is treated as a variable, something that will be figured out. It cannot be figured out. It must be planned for with the same rigor as every other major expense category. Build a realistic healthcare cost projection into your retirement budget and stress test it against scenarios where costs escalate faster than expected. Third, investigate long-term care insurance while you're still healthy enough to qualify and young enough for the premiums to be affordable. Policies purchased in your late 50s or early 60s cost a fraction of what care would cost out of pocket a decade later. Not everyone needs long-term care insurance, but everyone should understand their exposure. A single extended stay in a nursing facility can consume a lifetime of savings in 2 to 3 years. Having a plan for that possibility, whether insurance, dedicated savings, or a combination, is the difference between a managed risk and a catastrophic surprise. Now let me pull back and show you what connects every decade we've walked through, because this is the part of the video that I need you to hear more than anything else. The trap in your 20s is delay. You wait to start investing because the amounts feel too small to matter, and the delay costs you hundreds of thousands in compounding that can never be recovered. The trap in your 30s is overcommitment. You buy too much house, normalize too much debt, and crush the gap between your income and your expenses so thoroughly that wealth building stalls for a decade. The trap in your 40s is misallocation. You sacrifice retirement for your children's education, absorb the costs of aging parents without a plan, and allow the squeeze to paralyze your financial decision-making during the decade when the right decisions matter most. The trap in your 50s is panic. You either take too much risk trying to close the gap, or you shut down entirely, both of which waste the most powerful wealth-building window remaining. The trap in your 60s is miscalculation. You claim Social Security too early, withdraw from your portfolio too freely, and underestimate healthcare costs because nobody ever walked you through the math. 5 decades, 5 traps, and every single one of them operates the same way. They exploit the gap between what feels right in the moment and what the math actually says. Delay feels logical. Overbuying a house feels like progress. Funding your kids' college feels noble. Panic feels justified. Claiming Social Security early feels prudent. The feelings are real. The math doesn't negotiate with feelings. It doesn't bend for cultural expectations. It doesn't grade on a curve because you had good intentions. It simply runs, silently, in the background of your life, either compounding in your favor or compounding against you. Here's what haunts me about this pattern. Every one of these traps is avoidable. Not with luck, not with a high income, not with a financial advisor, although a good one certainly helps. They're avoidable with knowledge, with a working understanding of how compound interest curves behave over different time horizons, with clarity on how debt interest rates compare to investment return rates, with the ability to calculate what a dollar saved today becomes in 20 or 30 years, with the awareness that Social Security is an actuarial system with rules that reward patience in ways most people never see because nobody ever shows them the numbers side by side. Every trap I've described today could have been diffused, at any age, by the same single thing: financial literacy. That phrase gets thrown around a lot, and most people interpret it as knowing how to balance a checkbook or understanding what a stock is. That's not what I mean. Financial literacy, the kind that actually changes your life, is understanding how money moves through the decades of a human life, how compound interest accelerates when given time and decelerates when denied it, how a 22% APR on credit card debt and an 8% average return on index funds are the same mathematical force pointing in opposite directions, how buying a house at 43% debt to income doesn't make you a homeowner, it makes you a hostage. How every dollar diverted from retirement in your 40s costs $4 or $5 in your 60s. How an 8% annual delayed retirement credit on Social Security is a guaranteed return that no investment product in the world can match. The people who navigate each decade without falling into its specific trap aren't superhuman. They aren't high earners. The Ramsey Solutions study proved that 1/3 of millionaires never made 6 figures in a single working year. The top 5 professions among those millionaires were engineer, accountant, teacher, management, and attorney. Teachers. People who made $55,000 a year and arrived at 65 with 7-figure portfolios because they understood the rules of a game that everyone plays but almost nobody studies. Financial literacy is the through line. It's the thing that stops you from delaying in your 20s because once you've seen the compounding curve, waiting feels physically uncomfortable. It's the thing that keeps you from overbuying a house in your 30s because you can calculate the opportunity cost of a crushed investable gap in your sleep. It's the thing that protects your retirement contributions in your 40s because you understand the hierarchy of financial priorities and you know that your children can borrow for college, but you cannot borrow for old age. It's the thing that keeps you steady in your 50s because you know exactly how powerful catch-up contributions are, and you know that disciplined acceleration beats both panic and paralysis. It's the thing that makes your 60s the decade where everything comes together, instead of the decade where you realize it didn't. I made mistakes at almost every stage I described in this video. I delayed in my 20s, I overextended in my 30s, I almost fell into the misallocation trap in my 40s before I stopped and ran the actual numbers. The only reason I caught myself, the only reason the later traps didn't swallow me the way they swallow millions of Americans every year, is that I eventually sat down and learned how money actually works. The mechanics, the math, the systems, the rules that were always there, that were always available, that nobody in my life had ever bothered to explain. Once I understood them, the traps stopped working. They didn't disappear. They're still there, embedded in the structure of American financial life, waiting at every decade. But I could see them. I could feel them coming before I walked into them. The math became a flashlight, and the traps only work in the dark. You can learn the same thing at any age, 22 or 62. The math starts working in your favor the moment you understand it. There is no age where it's too early to start. There is no age where it's too late to make a meaningful difference. A 25-year-old who learns this today will arrive at 65 with options most people never imagined. A 55-year-old who learns this today can still build more wealth in the next 12 years than they built in the previous 30. The traps are predictable. The escapes are knowable. The rules are learnable. The only variable, the only thing that separates the people who build wealth from the people who wonder where it went, is whether you learn the rules before the traps catch you or after. Money isn't complicated. The system around it is designed to feel complicated because confusion is profitable for the companies selling you products. But the underlying mechanics are simple. Earn. Spend less than you earn. Invest the difference. Protect the gap. Give it time. Don't interrupt the compounding. These principles apply identically whether you're 24 or 64. They worked for the dental hygienist from Philadelphia who retired at 55 with $1.2 million. They work for the teacher in Ohio quietly building a 7-figure portfolio. They'll work for you at whatever age you're sitting at right now, the moment you decide to learn them. Every decade has a trap. Every trap has an escape. The escape is always the same thing: understanding how money actually works.